politics, the dynamics, and many other dynamics in universities are very, very complex. I have no doubt in my mind that it was Professor Tshwane's leadership ability that has resulted in a very, very smooth transition and eventually resulted in UNISA being one of the largest distance learning institutions in the country, in the world for that matter. Also, I've witnessed how he's handled the Africanization of the university. And that in itself was a complex process that required very, very, very intimate understanding of African dynamics. And again, his good leadership abilities and skills prevailed. I see him as a role model. I'm not going to say as an older brother, as a more experienced brother. And I know he's always most willing to help where we ask him to, like he's done now. Academically, Professor Tshwane's pedigree, which I'm not going to go through all the details, but safe to say that he's a qualified attorney, admitted to admitted as an attorney in South Africa. He's also an Anglican priest, studied at King's College. So I think that combination probably augurs very well for some of the leadership challenges that he's got to deal with. He also holds a degree in theology, a PhD from UCT, and many awards, academic awards, not just from local universities, but many universities around the globe. Professor Tshwane, many of you will remember, was also chairperson of the Human Rights Council, where he's done a stunning job. I still miss those days where the HRC was as impactful as it was under your leadership, Professor Tshwane. Professor Tshwane's passion for education has resulted in him being involved in many initiatives on the continent, in the country, and he's still quite involved in many academic associations, councils of universities, and so on and so on. He's been very involved in the higher education South Africa organization, and so I can go on. So his passion and commitment speaks for itself. But I think what's most telling about Professor Tshwane is his courage to speak about issues that's got to be dealt with, and sometimes in a way that very, very few leaders would do. I'll tell you guys a short story, and I'm sure with these indulgence. When Professor Tshwane was just appointed as Vice Chancellor and Principal of UNISA, I was on the council and I was part of the recruitment panel. He was interviewed on a breakfast show in London, Art Talk, that's the show for Professor Tshwane. And at that point in time, our former president, started making waves on the international stage, and he was asked for his comment. And his comment was just that he is of the view that the individual was not fit to be president at that stage. That obviously led to quite a bit of backlash, which, again, under his leadership, I think we dealt with in a very responsible way. We stood our ground, and he proceeded to be a very successful or a very complex university. So I thought to maybe speak about, and I'm not trying to embarrass you, Prof, but I think it's important that we say these things. And for the simple reason that it should encourage many of us to understand that if we want this country to be a better place, we've got to emulate quite a bit of the behavior of people like Professor Tshwane. So it gives me a very, very great privilege to introduce Professor Tshwane, and if you can help me to invite him to the stage. Thank you very much, Professor Tshwane.
Alf, thank you very much. You know, the thing that Alf doesn't say, for obvious reasons, is that he and I come from a wonderful place called Port Elizabeth. So that's the sort of kitchen stuff. And I'm taking over from Professor Yonka, and Matona, we're supposed to come from the Eastern Cape, but we really don't consider ourselves to be quite Eastern Cape. We call ourselves Western region. And I was reminded by Professor Yonka about another reason why we're so important. I think Mr. Jonas is not here, because I heard he was speaking today. I don't know whether he's participating in Musi Maimana's recitation speeches. He is not here. Clarissa and I come from one of the most historic towns in this country called Utenhage, which not many people know. And the people in Port Elizabeth sometimes want to make us feel like we come from Port Elizabeth. No, we don't. We come from Utenhage. So if Clarissa was here, I was going to remind him about that. Friends, thank you very much. I was quite inspired, like many of you were, by Lincoln's talk and address. In general, like many of you, I sometimes feel at times that, I've heard it all before. I said to somebody, you could almost say, he's going to say this next. You could almost say it for him. But there's something that is very important that he drew our attention to that could easily have gotten lost. It is a dilemma that most of us have. We talk so often about having this world-class constitution, right? We talk very much about having all the institutions of democracy. We talk very much about being a country where we receive not just institutions of finance and business and commerce that are second to none in Africa. But at the same time, we also know that we live, for a complex set of reasons, we live in a society where inequality is odious, absolutely abominable. The unemployment at one level is 29%, but in reality, it's nearer 45%, if you consider the whole spectrum of the unemployed. Now, there's nowhere in any country where you have unemployment of 45% and you still have the same government in place. But that's part of the dilemma we have, is that many of these people who, in their social and economic sphere, out of work, unemployed, homeless, and all of that, when they go to vote and they vote for the same government. In a political party, in reality, I've never been able to understand this. In fact, in terms of political science, it just doesn't make sense, doesn't it? Doesn't make sense at all, because in terms of political science, a government that just doesn't deliver for you at the level where it matters, most likely when you go as a voter to vote, you exercise your right to vote that government. There are all sorts of complex reasons which I don't want to go into. But this is the point that Lincoln made. He made it in terms of corruption. That almost in spite of our best will, when we talk at a certain level, at a high level, but what we do and what we act is at a very different level. In reality, there will be nobody in this country who who doesn't hate corruption and thieving that has really brought our state to its knees. But actually, even those who are right in the thick of it, they will tell you, and probably they mean it, that they hate corruption. It's like seeing Ace Makashula saying that we, the ANC, have been working so hard against corruption. You say, ha, who's fault? So there is a problem. There's a problem. Now philosophers call that a tragic gap. It is a gap between our aspirations and what we actually think and we truly believe in, and also the reality of the environment where we are in and what we actually do in that environment. It is that gap that exists. And therefore the challenge of leadership is to see how do we transcend that gap so that it doesn't become a gap of a race to the bottom, but rather it becomes a gap that reaches out to the possibility of otherness, of transformation, etc. First thing we need to do is to recognize the gap, and then we begin to say, how do we actually close the gap in such a manner that there is a level at which we will not be able to reach out to our highest aspirations. And that is called the tragic gap. It is that gap that is the challenge, I think, to what leadership is about. In September, I was invited to speak at an Ubuntu Leadership Academy in Porto, Portugal. They have this, what they call Ubuntu Festival every year in Porto, in Portugal. They established this Academy of Ubuntu because they realized that conceptually, if you actually use the understanding and the philosophy and ethics around Ubuntu, you are able to cover so many other ways about human behavior, about human conduct, about how we can actually get the better of ourselves, and how we are always reminded our relational activities that at the end of the day, none of us is an island. And in recognizing our relational activity, we become aware how actually we become more human, and to the extent that we related in a qualitative way to the other. Is to understand the other as also a human, and John Volman says it is about being human. In other words, being human is a process. You're not human because you are born and you breathe, etc. You're human because you're constantly in your life, and more or less like what Lincoln said, constantly enough, you're always seeking out and reaching out to this possibility of becoming more human day by day. So the being human is about the beingness of the human in you, that it begins to define who you are in a manner that is actually about the quality of being human. So the Ubuntu philosophy, you know what they've done? At this festival, which they have every year, at least on this occasion, I understand they do that every year. It was the only occasion that I was invited to this. They bring in generally civil society activists, generally young people from different situations of conflict and struggle in different parts of the world. There are people from Colombia and Venezuela and elsewhere in Latin America. There are people there from various countries in Africa where there are challenges and problems that are occurring today. There are people there from the Middle East. There are people there from some other countries in Asia. There are people there from Ireland, Northern Ireland, and other countries in Europe where there are major struggles happening at the moment. The idea was that the young people in general, who are engaged very much in finding solutions for peace, for development, and in dealing with issues of corruption, can actually have a tool which they can actually use in interrogating the kind of things that are happening around them. And so that they are able to have a quality engagement about the issues that change and transform their world. It was actually hugely impressive for me, and I was to some degree feeling guilty because I thought, why don't we do something like this in South Africa? I mean, even a thing like an ethics conference in South Africa, as far as I know, I'm not aware of anything like that. Where actually government, civil society, business actually come together and say, why can't we just collaborate together to create a society that is rooted in an ethical conduct, a way of doing things that actually makes all of our lives a lot better, and that brings certainty and understanding to what kind of society that we really wish to become. So that it doesn't just become a matter, oh, we have a most wonderful constitution in the world. I mean, at the end of the day, for the person who's hungry, the person who hasn't got a home, whose shack is leaking, whom they find rain has come in, who is marked and killed by criminals, etc., etc. None of those people, in the end, the Constitution means nothing to them. It means what it means to us as sort of middle class, people who are in a safe place, and all of that. I wanted to say to Pete Mouton, who's not here, sadly, I wanted to say to Pete Mouton, that part of that contrast in a country like this is that whereas there's a huge level of poverty and inequality and suffering in this country, it is possible still to have a PSG and a Capitec Bank that actually makes billions. And you have to ask yourself, where do these billions come from? As somebody who's observing this, I wonder, when you go to the malls, most of our towns and cities, there's a huge mall somewhere, and there are people doing business in this. But how do you do business when actually 40% of the people of this country are out of work? Who are you doing business with? And so I could ask the same question to PSG to say, who's banking with you? Where do they get the money from? Where does it come from? If you ever thought about what kind of banking business you do as Capitec, with those people, as a matter of interest, one of the founders of Capitec is somebody I used to know as a student leader in the 70s, who was one of the leaders of the Afrikaner Studentenbond, who at the time when I was president and general secretary of SASO, Michiel Leroux. He was one of the people who did the DA report that seems to be causing all the fallout that's going on at the moment with Tony Leon and Coetzee. But the point I'm making is that he's one of the founders of Capitec Bank. But isn't it a problem? Isn't it a problem that we live in this country that clearly is awash with capital? But the real question is, who does that capital serve? Yeah. And that's a question we should be asking again and again. Who really does it serve? But I think we also need to ask another question. To begin to say, how can we make that capital serve South Africans? Beyond just the capitalist elite and others who are in the middle and upper classes. So we ask those questions as it were, rather together. Here is my point. We're not asking those questions because the problem of our leadership in this country is a leadership that is without imagination. Foresaw said it very clearly that the problem of our politics, this is quoting French philosopher Michel Foucault, the problem of our politics is the lack of the poverty of the imagination. That's also quite important because at the end of the day, to be in politics and to be participating in it is not and should not be about how do we make the present better. It's not about living and residing in what you have. It's about the capacity to stretch your imagination beyond the present and imagine a different future. And be able to say, with an expansive sense of the imagination, which authors and poets don't find very difficult to do, the problem we have is to have that capacity for the imagination. We need to find a way of cultivating that capacity for the imagination. We won't be able to cultivate that capacity for the imagination unless we, one, are able to be observant, to observe what goes on around you, to be observant about the land and the ways and everything and the people around you, to observe human conduct, to observe what is happening to the natural environment, to the struggles for water by some of the people, to the questions about climate and climate change, to understand how they impact on the quality of the lives of ordinary people. The second thing that I think you need to do, Lincoln mentioned, you need to have a very acute sense of self-understanding. To be able to understand yourself, who you are, what needs to tick, to understand your rational and moral sense and its limits and its possibilities, to be able to say that in the end, what is it that I actually do? The third thing that these people in the Ubuntu festival, Ubuntu Leadership Academy there, the third thing they say that once you have in fact recognized that you need to have a critical sense, being capable of being critical of yourself and being capable of having a critical insight of human conduct, including your own, of the environment in which you live in. Because if you don't have the critical sense and the courage to actually respond to your own critical intuition and insight, if you fail to do that, then you'll never be able to see anything that is wrong. One of the things that Lincoln failed to do, the question that I've always had is the extent to which good people, good men and women, and some of them people that we know, for some reason have been able to capitulate to what was obviously a crooked program. I mean, Brian Molife, those of us who know him, and some of us have known him a long time, you would never have expected a few years ago that Brian Molife would have been an agent for a corrupt project, of the kind that he became. I'm certain that I stand here. I doubt that he gained as much as what he gave to all the people who used him. But he's intelligent enough. Huh? He had a very good record as a public servant in the Treasury and elsewhere. How on earth, some of us ask, could Brian Molife have ended where he did end? You don't understand. So you say to yourself, the reality is that some of the best people that we know, that Zuma boasts that he never went to school, and he's right. But his power over educated people puts all of us to shame. He's been able to manipulate very educated and knowledgeable people, way beyond his own intelligence and education. And what kind of country is that? How can we have a country where at the end of the day, educated people cannot act like intelligent people? And that's something that I think needs further examination. Because I'm no longer able to confidently say that educated people, on account of their education and knowledge and all of that, are able to know right from wrong, to distinguish and to discern right from wrong, and to know what the consequences of what they do actually are, and make decisions about where they are and where they stand on the right, in light of their understanding of what those consequences are. Often you get the impression that many of these very intelligent people haven't really calculated the consequences. To be honest, I don't buy sufficiently enough the idea that people were afraid, they wanted to protect their jobs, whatever it is. I don't buy that. Because I think at the end of the day, if you've got a refined sense of right and wrong, you know what is the right thing to do, you know what is the wrong thing that you have done. And you find a way of expressing yourself in a manner that is important. But here's the challenge. And Garcia, one of the Spanish writers on Ubuntu, by the way, says that the thing to do is to step into the breach, step into the gap. Is to step into the gap in order to enable to pull the least progressive thought beyond itself into a transformed future. In order to do that, you have to take the risk. You have to take the risk to be in that gap. If you are going to move in order to create the bridge that is necessary to reach out to the other side. So the idea is that understand what actually is going on. There's a wonderful quote from Alice Walker, latest book of poems. Alice Walker writes about, she says, blackness isn't just the gap between the sun and the galaxy. Blackness in astrophysics. Blackness is actually that gap that pulls together the sun and the fallacy to make a contribution that actually transforms the way the weather patterns go and all of the things that actually happen. So what she says, at the end of the day, it is not blackness to think that it's about eliminating whiteness. Blackness is not about eliminating whiteness, which I often feel I want to tell Julius Malema that whiteness, or the being white, is not something you eliminate, but actually the being white, it's about what you actually do to transform your own reality. So this is the challenge we have of leadership in our country. It's a moral challenge. It is in fact to be able to say we need leadership with imagination, to understand what the imagination is about. It's about the character of change that we need actually to do. It is the transforming of the reality that we actually have to deal with. Now that's the big question then. The question is leadership with imagination. It's not just leadership. It's leadership with imagination. And in other words, this idea of really earnestly believing that it can be otherwise, it can be different, it can be better. And indeed, not only it can be better, but actually it is doable. It requires me, it requires you, so that we can have, at the end of the day, with all the sacrifices and the critical minds and the critical thinking, we can in fact become a better world. Thank you.
And I must be honest, you were the one speaker that I anticipated will take the most time. Not because I think you got to get to the gap, because I know we were all looking for, we were like, there is so much that he could possibly talk about. So thank you for making my job very easy. The guests or the delegates will now have an opportunity just now to interrogate or rather to engage with you on your topic. So please take a seat. The prof mentioned that he is from a small little town, Euthenake. We call it Etinach. And I think prof is only proof that people start knowing the vernacular names of where we come from. So Diabulela, prof. Courageous leader indeed, Alfred. Voice of reason. And a man who has been credited for coining the phrase, black man, you are on your own. And that, just to mention what you said, that the blackness isn't about eliminating whiteness. So it's black man, you're on your own. And so we can paraphrase and say, men or women of South Africa, it looks as if you are on your own. Some of the points that the prof calls upon us to look into as South Africans is to understand yourself as an individual and as a leader, including your limits, to cultivate the capacity to be imaginative, to have leadership with imagination, of imagining the possibility. It actually reminded me of, I think, is it Brand South Africa? Or one of the agencies, or SA Tourism. It speaks about possibilities of, or imagine the possibility of this country. The other point the prof made is that we all need to have a critical insight of ourselves, meaning being self-aware, and of those around us, as well as the environment in which we live, operate in. And I think what I'm taking away from here, because I never thought about it that way, is that if we fail to do the last thing, you fail to see anything that's wrong, because you don't understand anything. And those that have that ability will be the ones who get away with a lot. Murder. He closed off with saying we have a moral challenge with our leadership. A challenge of transforming our reality of our current challenge. Leadership with imaginative, or rather we need leadership with imagination, believing it can be otherwise and that it is doable. Thank you very much, Prof. Prof Yonke, this is your last session. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, Mr. Tosi Jonas, just before we went to lunch, advised he had an emergency, a family emergency, and he couldn't be with us today. I know a lot of you are also looking forward to his presentation, but the Prof is going to be our last speaker, and meaning that the program will end slightly earlier.
Yeah, I think there's a mistake. I'm not going to be the speaker. This was the last speech. I know Prof. Tshwane is a man of principle, and he's not scared to disagree with people who don't agree with those principles. Really, words of wisdom. It was a pleasure again to have him here with us today. It's also now your opportunity to ask a question or two or three. There's going to be the first one, the second one, and the third one, and the fourth one. Yeah. Can we start here? Leslie, right here in front.
Thank you, Prof. Yonke. Prof, thank you very much for an inspiring talk. Particularly interested in what you call leadership with imagination. And I would like to know, how do you harness that in young people? How do you ensure that a 15-year-old grows up with that kind of mindset and aspire for the right things? as we know that our media portrays a certain picture of success, how do we ensure that we, or you, not we, because I still want to learn what this means. How do we ensure in the generation, your generation, people that have gone before us, assist us in ensuring that we dream big enough, we are imaginative enough as the young people who are supposed to take this continent to greater heights. Thank you.
Question there.
Thanks, Professor. Professor Pichana, maybe I should start by saying I had the privilege of working for Professor Pichana's younger brother at some point. And he used to say that for everything that is good we see in him, we must blame his mother. And everything that is bad with him, we must blame Obutbani. Used to call it. The description of leadership without imagination, Obutbani. I know that in the main it was looking at the leadership of the country. What would you say, and I've been pondering this question quite a lot personally for years, how would you describe the business leadership in South Africa? If in the past, if you just cast your mind back in the days of President Mbeki and so on, there used to be a complaint around what you used to call investment strike. In other words, business leadership in South Africa taking a very deliberate view not to invest in the country for whatever reasons. Fast forward all the way to the last so-called 10 wasted years. Fast forward today. What in your introspective, creative mind, how would you describe the business leadership in South Africa, and how would we possibly help to move that kind of thinking within that leadership to help? Because indeed, the problems you have described, the problems we have in this country, as you have described them, will not be resolved only by the political leadership in this country. And so I'm quite interested to hear your views on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you mind if we deal with those two questions? Because
Okay.
actually,
Okay, thank you, Prof. Please go ahead.
Actually, two very deep questions. Let me start with the last one.
Sorry, is the mic on? Speak. No.
Sorry. Let me have.
I think
Let me start with the last one. You know, not so long ago, I was part of a meeting where President Mbeki was meeting Afrikaner leaders, and many of them Afrikaners in business, in education, etc., who had asked to meet with him. So we were there with them, and he says to them, because some of them were into this thing that this country doesn't work for us, etc. He's saying, you know, President Mbeki is an economist. The reality is that many Afrikaner business in this country is better off today than it was under apartheid. Afrikaner business in this country is thriving, whether you talk about Koos Becker and others, and now we heard the capitalization of PSG, you may even mention Steinhoff, the Johan Ruperts, all the big Afrikaner money is doing business. So he says to them, I've got two questions for you. One, what is the problem? Can you define the problem properly for you as business person? The second one, what is not working that can be fixed and needs to be fixed? Because in this mess that you are telling us about, you still have been able to, beyond yourselves, beyond anything that you have ever been, you're making a lot of money. The second thing, if I may just say, one of the things that I've been saying lately, which has to do with the imagination, or lack of it, I've been saying, I come from a township, and we live in townships. If you walk into or drive into Soweto today, you'll find lots of people, many of them young people, hanging around in the streets with nothing. If you live in any country that has got 3 million plus young South Africans who are not at school, who are not at university, who are not at work. At the last count it was 3 million, but I'm sure it's gone a lot higher now. If you're in a country where 55% of young people under the age of 30 are unemployed, many of them have never been in employment. That would be your preoccupation day and night as a government, not so. It will be saying something that says to you, if I get nothing else right, this is what I must get right, like yesterday. So I have two things. And I'm saying, if that is so, why is it that we don't have a major initiative by government? I'm not talking about yes or I'm saying, if I had been in government, I would be saying, and make a big announcement, to say the priority is going to be that we do something about youth in this country. What are we going to do? We're going to raise special capital from business, all business. Some of it voluntary, but if it doesn't come, it may be by other means. We're saying that we need to raise capital that is dedicated to this. Like what happened during the apartheid regime post 1976, when they established IDT. Establish that, what's it going to do? It's going to make sure that every young person, I mean every, even if there's a law has to be passed that if you're not at school, you're not at university, you're not at work, you will be in a training program for 12 months. And you will be getting support and incentives to be in a program to train, and money will be made available for training centers and not just TVETs, by the way, all manner of training places to take place anywhere and everywhere in the country. So that all over the country, there'll be young people who are engaged in training and learning and whatever happening, so that they don't just stay in the streets or even lying about at home. When they finish in 12 months' time, there will be a fund. That fund will also enable them to have startups, innovation, to be SMEs, and to do what and to do that, so that they can actually begin to exercise the benefits of their training. Because not all of it is going to come to government, nor to the private sector. And I'm saying that this lack of imagination means that you actually fail to realize that your first priority as government is to make sure that this ticking time bomb of 55% of young people under 30 being unemployment, not at school. The third thing I'll do what Margaret Thatcher did in England. I'll say to young people at 18 and 19, I'll pay you to stay at school for another 2 years. We'll actually provide you to stay in a training place, stay at university productively if you succeed, etc. For another 2 years, that enables society to buy time for you to get some further training, etc. So the point I really want to make is that if you've got leadership with imagination, you wouldn't just be stuck in the old way of doing things and just simply say, this is how the economic forces are actually working, they work in this way, and therefore there's no other way we can do it. And I think that's not good enough for a country in an environment that we are in. And young people in our country are entitled to expect better of us than what we are doing at the moment. Regarding the first one of the things that I was very excited about at the Ubuntu Leadership Academy in Porto was how much this was in fact a program for young people. They are working and doing this as lifelong learning processes. They are doing it in places where there's huge unemployment, in places where there are social problems in the inner cities of Portugal. They are doing it post-school, after school, in school, so that it's a program that's running all the time. It's running with young people. And it's also a program that brings young activists from different parts of the world to engage with European activists, largely in areas and places where there are difficulties. And I'm saying, this kind of lifelong learning that is obligatory ought to capture the imagination of young people in our country. If anything, we give young people the sense that they belong, that they are cared for, that their future is being cared for. Not this idea that it doesn't matter. I mean, one of the things that I talk about at the moment, I was at South Plateau University the other day. I say it's unheard of the amount of murders that take place at universities in our country, where students actually stab each other to death, rape. A woman student is raped by a fellow student. You can go on and you say that, how do we keep quiet about young people when these things actually happen? And I'm not hearing any interventions that are taken. Beyond, I don't think the intervention for me, it's not about police. Please don't put police into universities. Don't make universities security zones. We need a different, more progressive, more developmental kind of engagement that humanizes people and young people at the university. Don't criminalize them. Make them even more human conscious. In other words, their consciousness about their humanity must take center stage. So I think, personally, as part of this program that I'm talking about, that is concentrating on young people, and give yourself 5 to 10 years and say, we're making a commitment to young people of our country for 5 to 10 years. We're going to have very specific interventions that make sure that you are educated, you are trained, you can actually run your own business, and you can begin to make a life of yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, there was a question there at the back, and then there was one here. So we'll just take those two questions, Prof. selected.
Okay. Professor Diana, my question is related to, first of all, I really want to say we have had an opportunity to benefit from your leadership of the South African Human Rights Council. And during your leadership, you have said, and I remember this so vividly, you have said time and again that South Africa has got leadership responsibility towards the rest of Africa. And I think in hindsight, I must confess that your statements have been proven to be true. And in my honest opinion, there is a benefit if South Africa were to execute its historical duty of providing leadership to all Africans, and so that everybody could. If South Africa fails in that regard, the alternative would be countries from other continents stepping up to the plate to provide leadership. Already we have seen a little bit of that in the demise of the South African footwear and textile industry. At the business school, we had conducted a 2-year-long research at Okuruleni, and the findings clearly show that there should have been leadership. So my humble question to you is, if you were to just elaborate a little bit on your experience from the days of your South African Human Rights Commission. Thank you.
Okay, there was the last question here.
Good afternoon, Professor. Good afternoon, everyone. I feel rather privileged to be exposed to your thinking today and your wisdom. So thank you for your talk this afternoon. The one question that I do have is, it's quite strange that the concept of Ubuntu is actually implemented and actually brought to life in Portugal. And when we look at the actual term, the birth of such a term is in Africa. And whilst I'm inspired by the concept of leadership of the imagination, I do wonder, Prof, whether there is a space for leadership of remembrance. Because to my previous colleague's point, it's really sad to be on the continent of Africa and in South Africa and remembering that brothers and sisters of the rest of the continent had a role to play in the freedom that I get to live in as a Black South African. And to what extent do you see the role of remembrance? And I wonder whether we recognize as South Africans that we do have that leadership role to play in the race. Because if I understand some of my history, sir, I would understand that Ghana, Nigeria, Liberia, Kenya, they all had a role to play in the reality that we live today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate both approaches to what I think is the same question. Let me just put one thing aside. I'm not one of those who believes, because I think it's too utilitarian. I'm not the one who believes that, because certain countries harbored South Africans at a time of difficulty, therefore. Because I think most of those countries were not doing that in order one day they flood your country by that. I think that's the wrong way of thinking. The more important approach I take is to say to South Africa, and Prof, you're quite right to use what I've been saying. I've been saying to South Africa, any country that wants to prosper, look around the world, it's good to be a country that receives migrants and makes it possible for migrants to prosper in their country. And I've often said that actually, with 60 million people in this country, we can live with another 30 million. So the country is not really unable to survive. But with more people and drawing from the skills and the expertise from anywhere else in the world, this country would actually thrive. So instead, you find that the Department of Home Affairs spends so many resources of such a kind trying to put up shutters all over our borders. And for me, that is wasted energy. Instead, what they should be doing is to provide ways and means for people from anywhere else in the world to come and be part of this wonderful, exciting experiment that is South Africa. One day I said to a minister of social welfare at that time, why is it that we put up all these borders between South Africa and Lesotho, for God's sake, and make it impossible for Basotho, who've got Basotho on either side of the border, they are not able to do anything. Swaziland, why are we putting up so much border? Zimbabwe, why are we putting up so much borders around Zimbabwe, around Tshwane? Doesn't make sense. Because the truth, the way in which the laws of economy work, there will be more Zimbabweans who come to South Africa today without resentment. They come and make South Africa work. They accumulate our South Africans in time will go to Zimbabwe and make Zimbabwe work. Right? That's just what is going to happen. So it is actually not a problem that we've got Zimbabweans coming to South Africa. That's not a problem. And we ought to have the maturity to understand that we need the expertise and the enthusiasm and the entrepreneurship that Zimbabweans bring to this country. That one day we will be exporting that to Zimbabwe, to any other country. So I think it's part of the problem of the imagination, that we've gotten ourselves so caught up in forms of nationalism that are and identity politics that are getting narrower and narrower and narrower, instead of a more expansive view of what it is to be an African, what it is to be a South African, What does it mean to have the generosity and the hospitality to be an African? I was in part among the people at the Human Rights Commission who drafted the Refugee Act at that time. Mangosuthu Buthelezi was the minister then. So we drafted an act which we wanted, and really I believe it was correct. That the process of ensuring that there's an immigration policy, a refugee policy, that was separate from government. It's not driven by government, but government sets the law, and actually it must actually run properly without interference from government after that. The reason that has happened is that all of that has become so politicized. Every government has got its own weird ideas about how to protect the borders of South Africa. Not from war. Many of these people who come here are not going to create war or whatever it is. Or even Nigerians for that matter. Those people whom, as South Africans imagine, are responsible for levels of crime will be dealt with in the normal course of how the law works in a country. But you can't possibly say that Nigerians, but because they are Nigerians, are the ones who are responsible for crime. You can't say that. But you can say that actually we can get expertise and intellectual knowledge and understanding and entrepreneurship from Nigerians of the kind that they do in their own country in Nigeria. Why can't they do it here? And South Africans can learn from them. South Africans can get jobs. South Africans can be skilled in ways that they learn from other people as well. So I just think that we're so caught up in a narrowing and narrower ways of expressing our identity. That's not good.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the positive way in which you contribute today. This is what this Leadership Summit is about, is for everybody to take part in this debate. So I want to say thank you very much also for that.
Thank you, Prof. Without further ado, I'm going to, Thank you, Prof. Pijana. You can take your seat.
I'm glad I've been released.
You've done a good job. I'd like to call upon I'd now like to call upon Dr. Edgar Nesamboni, Executive Dean of Faculty of Management Sciences, for an important announcement. So Dr. Edgar Nesamboni. Ladies and gentlemen, please give him a round of applause.
Very upset that you have some sneak-in CV of mine, and I wonder what you're going to say about me. Thank you very much. And I think,
decided to stop him.
and for starters, I'm doing a vote of thanks first. So I want to first thank the program director. I think she deserves a hand of applause. Here this day quite beautifully. And if you don't know, I think you can charge for this. Yeah, you can. And what we have done, we have paid you, but we have donated it to the Mix Foundation. The Tshwane University of Technology Business School is proud to be the pioneer for this leadership summit. As you heard at the beginning, this is the first one that we are hosting, and I can assure you it's not the last one. So if you see an invite next year for another summit, please respond, because this is the caliber of summit that we want to host as a business school. So the word of thanks first go to the TUT Business School and the Minx Foundation, and most particularly Professor Jonker and Mr. Alfred Acosta. I think they are friends for quite a while, because they've been doing this in PE for 11 years, I heard this morning. So we are now starting the first one at Victoria, and obviously at some point we will be at number 11. But thank you, Prof. Jonker, and thank you, Mr. Acosta. To the sponsors, the Innovation Hub has been part of this right from the beginning, and I'm happy that Dr. Tongo is here. Thank you very much for contributing to the success of this day. Thank you also for hosting us in this beautiful venue. The other sponsors, as you see behind me, is the African Unity as well as EOH. And they also contributed to the success. To that, they need a round of applause. To the speakers, first of all, Bongi Beta. Prof, I shook her hand before she left. She will be your student next year. So thank her first for a presentation. She's from YES. And the answer to her after she challenged us that yes, she will be admitted into our business school next year. Mr. Lincoln Mali from Standard Bank Group. What I thought when he finished presenting Prof. Yonker is that I think we need to plan a master class that he hosts at the school. And trust me, all of you will be invited. I thought you were going to clap hands for that. The third speaker was Mr. Pete Mouton from Pizza Health Group Limited. And he has health. Is your friend? I was on a serious note. Is your friend, right? Because we need the help. It's a pity he has left, but as a business school, we need that help. So, because we have his contact details, we are going to have coffee with him from Yonker and see how we harness the help. Because I realize that PSG group is very big in education, but there can be a piece of that help that comes with you to TUT business. And you think I'm joking, I'm very serious. Obas is turning red because he knows I'm serious. The next one is Dr. Tamunorwa Toga. What Toga? Togo. Sorry, Togo. My apologies. I will say this first. When I look at your video, I saw a lot of space at the Innovation Hub. There are a lot of empty spaces. So I'm wink, man. The business school can really fit very well in this space. So we will talk. But thank you for your contributing and thank you for your speech. Lastly, Professor Pichana, it's not the first time you are contributing to a business school. I remember you once even attended our prize giving. Thank you for being the friend of the business school. And we will be having other invitations coming your way because next year we are doing a lot of master classes and I already foresee a master class that you can share for us. Thank you for taking your time. It was quite sad that Mr. Jonas couldn't make it. I remember when I was born in the late 60s, if you don't believe me, it's true. And I managed to start reading English, I think, in the 80s. And they used to have a magazine called Soccer, where they interview soccer players. And one of the questions they used to ask was the person you like to meet. And most of them then will say they want to meet Lionel Richie, Michael Jackson, Nelson Mandela. So if I was asked that question before today, a person I would like to meet would be Percy Jonas. Why? Because I have one question to ask him. Because it's when he says 600, was it 600 rand, 600,000? Because that 600 million gives me a headache. And now I don't have an opportunity to ask him that question, but I know Alfred and Obas managed to get him to agree to come to this one. And I know, like me, most of you actually came because it was in the program. I won't ask you to raise your hand if you came because the rest was going to be here. But what I think we should do is that, again, a seminar at the business school where he must pay us back for today and come and host a seminar. And what we are again going to do is look at the list of the people that were here today and we invite you for that seminar. Is that a deal? Yes. Thank you very much. To all the delegates, thank you for being part of this successful day. We are very happy about our first leadership summit. And it was only successful because you are here. The final word of thanks goes to the summit organizers, more specifically Ms. Charmaine Smith from Studio 55. Where's Charmaine? There she is at the back. Thank you very much. Dr. Unene Gregory. They worked tirelessly for for this to be a success. I was telling Lionel in the morning that in July this year, and Kobas has only been with us since January. In July this year, he almost hanged himself because he thought this won't be a success. But the two ladies that I've mentioned their name now are the ones that really had sleepless nights to make this a success, and I want us to give them another round of applause. In the program, it says, somebody going to put this slide?
It's up.
Oh yeah, the first slide. You see that there's a special announcement that I'm expected to make. I'm not getting married, so that's not it. There is no pan in the oven. I'm not getting a promotion yet. So I will start with a story so that I can give you a prelude to this particular announcement. When each one of you sitting here hear the name TUT, a lot of things comes to your mind. And I won't ask you what, because I know one of you will say, we see you on TV with student protest. But what you might not know, which I'm going to give you for free, is the fact that in South Africa, out of the 26 universities, we are number 12. In South Africa, amongst the universities of technology, we are number 1. In Africa, amongst the universities of technology, we are still number 1. Today, our VC circulated a communique which is indicating 2020 best global university in the world. This is now the ranking for the coming year. Guess where we are? Number 1,100 in the world. Now, what is this big announcement about? Our business school is over 15 years old, also if you didn't know. And we were called the business school in the beginning because initially we started within the technical Pretoria. It was just called the business school. 2004 we became TUT. It became the TUT Business School. But what many people do not know is that we are the only university of technology with a business school. Some of you didn't know that, right? Yes. One thing that you might also not realize, we are the only business school in the capital city. We have UP in Pretoria, we have UNISA in Pretoria, but their business schools are not here. One is in Midrand, one is in Sandton. So now, what opportunity does it give to the number 1 UOT in Africa is to take the space. Now, the announcement has to do with the fact that the Senate of TUT in their last meeting approved the change of name for our business school, where we are taking a stake in Tshwane. But on top of that, we are saying and communicating to the world what type of a business school are we. So if I can have the next slide. That is our new name. The Tshwane School for Business and Society. Why Tshwane? We own Tshwane. And there's no other, they cannot relocate their business school back in Pretoria. And I do not foresee another university springing up in Pretoria. So we will remain the Tshwane School of Business. But on top of that, what we are saying, because we are a university of technology, we can't just be a business school. We can't just be a business school that is shooting to the skies only at executives. We want to be a business school that impacts society. We want to be a business school where, within its vicinity, there is a mix of executives and there is in the same venue, township entrepreneurs. there is in the same space rural entrepreneurs. That is why we purposefully put in our name that as a business school, we will impact business, but on top of that, we are going to impact society. So as you saw, the theme of today's summit, it also talked about impacting society. And that is something that you can hold us accountable for. That in next year's summit, you can ask us, what is it that we have done to ensure that we are impacting society? And we can assure you, we will be able to list you things that we are already doing. One thing that that is in our plans as I speak to you now, is that we are going to create executive programs for township entrepreneurs. We are going there is actually a program in place which is internationally accredited, which will specifically be focusing on rural entrepreneurs. So as an executive, one thing that we have learned today, and some of us were speaking of this over lunch, is that we tend to separate executives and people that come from society. Whereas if we can have a conversation, which I think next year's summit will also allow for that to happen, a conversation where a township entrepreneur is presenting after a CEO of a multinational company. Can you imagine the cross-pollination that can happen there? So this is what our business school is planning to do. And for that, I want to thank you. You are the first ones to hear about this, and you are so privileged to hear this good news from you. Thank you very much.
Prof, I think we're done. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your indulgence and your cooperation. Everybody has been thanked, but I think it's only fair that I also thank the marketing team for the Innovation Hub. They work effortlessly in working with Tshwane and everybody else. Thank you, ladies. And thank you for being a great guest. I'm sure you can mingle afterwards and network. And I'm going to go speak to Prof and see if he can hire me next year.